Welcome back, my friends, family, and fellow nerds. Welcome back to the Midgar Press, where we are covering combat. This is part two. I have deemed there will be a part three just because there is still a lot to cover. And I don't want to make this, a 2 hour long video. So let's get back into it. Melee combat. So to attack someone in combat, in melee specifically, because there are rules for both melee and for ranged. And right now we're going to talk about the melee. So to attack someone in melee, you generally need to be within 2 meters. Now, if you have a long weapon, you can be within 4, but that's only a couple items. On the grid map, you need to be positioned in a square adjacent to the enemy, including diagonally. So anywhere around you, you can basically hit them. When attacking in close combat, you can use the skill that covers the type of weapon you are wielding. Damage. If the attack hits, your weapon determines which dice you should roll to see how much damage you inflict to the enemy. The damage can be increased by your damage bonus and a dragon roll, and decreased by armor. So when we get to the gear, it's going to be a long episode when we get to gear, because if you're used to, weapons not really doing damage, for example, D&D, Pathfinder. I play a goblin rogue within Pathfinder, and because she's small, she's considered small in Pathfinder. Goblins are. She has 2 daggers. She dual wields daggers because that's what rogues do. But she does a D4 of damage. It really doesn't do that much. Now, do I do it because it doesn't do much damage, or do I do it because it's flare? I do it because it's flare. But within Dragonbane, a dagger or a knife does a D8 of damage. And again, we'll break down, the damage or the amount of damage done per item within the gear once we get to gear. So stay tuned, we'll get to it. Damage bonus. Your damage bonus is determined by your score in the attribute on which weapon skill is based on, so agility or strength. Because I think it starts at 13. If it's at 13, you get a D4 extra, and that's either for agility or strength. I can't remember what it is for the D6. Still learning my way. Weapon. You can have up to 3 weapons at hand. Write them down in the weapons section of your character sheet. To attack with a weapon, it must be drawn. Drawing weapon kept at hand, exchanging your drawn weapon for another weapon at hand is a free action. Picking up another weapon from the ground or from your inventory costs a regular action. And we've already talked about that. Excuse me. Yeah, we've already talked about that. Strength requirement. Some weapons have a strength requirement. If your strength, as in your player character, is lower than the requirement, you get a bane on all attacks and parries with that weapon. If your strength is less than half the requirement, you cannot use that weapon at all. So it is a serious potential. Grip. Weapons require either 1 or 2 hands to use. You can only use 1 two-handed weapon or 2 one-handed weapon, including a shield, drawn at the same time. The strength requirement of a one-handed weapon decreases by 3 if you hold it with 2 hands. So even though it says that it's only requiring, one hand to grip the actual weapon, for example, longsword, you can still hold it by two, and it just lowers the required strength to hold that weapon. Long weapons, just talked about this a second ago. An attack with a weapon with the long feature, such as a long spear or lance, can hit enemies up to 4 meters away, so that's 2 squares. With such a weapon, it is also possible to attack past a friendly combatant and hit with an enemy on the other side. So if it is you in 1 square, to the right of you is a ally, and then to the right of you again is the enemy, then you could attack through your fellow ally. Now, obviously, if you rolled a demon, a natural 20, you may end up hitting your ally, but that's a statement for another time. Prone targets. If you are standing up but your enemy is lying on the ground, your attack gets a boon and inflicts an extra d6. Now, critical hits. Critical hits. This is what I love about this game. It gives you options. In D&D and Pathfinder, any system that has like a critical hit, it's typically you just double your damage. That's typically how it works. In this game, though, you got 3 options. So let's go ahead and get at it. By rolling a dragon when you attack, you score a critical hit. And again, a dragon is a 1. This means that a dragon roll is required to parry or dodge the attack, and that you may choose one of the following effects. Roll double the amount of dice for your weapon's damage before adding any damage bonus and other bonuses. For example, if you get a critical hit with a broadsword, which is 2d6, you have damage bonus of d4. So the damage will be 4d6 plus 4. Now imagine if that enemy is knocked prone. Then you're doing a 5d6 plus a d4. That amount of damage is crazy. Crazy. Now, here's another option. You can immediately perform a second attack against another enemy. This additional attack is a free action, and you would treat it just like normal. You have to roll against your weapon skill to see if you hit. If you hit, then you roll damage. Or option number 3. Armor has no effect against the attack, as it finds a gap or a weak spot. This effect can only be chosen if the attack deals piercing damage. Optional roll below. I think that's a pretty good idea. Now, we haven't actually covered armor yet, and it's coming up. But with the armor, let's just say you have 4 armor. Basically, what happens is you take the total damage done to you, and we're going to say 10. Something hits you for 10 slashing damage, okay? With your armor, you subtract 4 from the damage. So 10 minus 4 equals 6. So your character, in reality, takes 6 points of damage, not 10, because you're subtracting the 4 points of armor that you have. And that's one of the things I like about the combat system is the armor. It actually feels like it's doing something rather than D&D, where it's like, oh yeah, I've got a 19 in armor. Does it hit? No, it doesn't hit. Does it hit? No, it doesn't hit. Or, something has to roll really high and it finally hits you and your armor doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything. You know, it's stupid to me. The armor system in D&D 5th edition is stupid to me. I can make a whole video about armor. In fact, I'm making a note right now. Making a note because it's just stupid. So let's read these optional rules at the bottom. If you hit shove, if you hit an enemy with a melee attack and your strength damage bonus is equal to or higher than your opponent's damage bonus, you could choose to shove the enemy up to 2 meters in any direction to an adjacent square. You are using a grid map. In addition to doing damage, this movement does not count towards the enemy's total movement in the round and does not trigger free attacks from anyone. Monsters cannot shove or be shoved. That's a lot of calculations or a lot of things to keep up with, because it's like, oh hey, what's your damage bonus? Oh, okay. It's just too much to keep track of. So, you know, I like that it's in there. It adds, you know, if you know anything about me so far from these videos, you know that I like to add a little bit of flair and spice to the game, but I don't like to add a million things that's going to make it harder for the GM to run the game. Because that, you know, the whole point of this game is for the players to have fun and the GM to have fun. If it's a one-sided thing and only the players are having fun and the GM's not, it's not going to last long. And vice versa. You know, if the GM is the only one that's having fun and the players aren't, I bet you they're not going to show up to the next session. So be mindful of what optional rules you put in there. You know, it's something to just try out, definitely, but it's not everybody's cup of tea, of course. Damage types. So there are damage types there are 3 different types of damage: slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. The damage types of various weapons are listed in the weapon tables of Chapter 6. Some weapons, such as swords, can inflict both slashing damage and piercing damage. Now, it's true. There's a lot of weapons that do 1, 2, or all 3. Now, I know what you're saying, and what? But if you think about it, it makes sense. Because why can't a sword be both slashing and piercing? You know, if you're jabbing your sword, that's piercing. Or if you're bringing your sword down, you're slashing. Like, why doesn't that make sense? That makes sense to me. You know, it took me a while to think about it and really understand why, but because I'm so used to the D&D 5th edition system where they either have one and that's it. They just have one type of damage. So, you know, playing this system, this Dragonbane system, like I said, it's a newer TTRPG from Free League. It's really opened my eyes to a lot of new things, and it makes more sense this way. I never would have thought about it had I not played this. So it's crazy. It's honestly crazy. Anyways, let's. Ooh. So yeah, you must state whether you are stab or slash before you roll your die. It's very important to state which type of damage you're doing, because some monsters may be more susceptible to it than others. The damage type influences the effectiveness of armor, and monsters can be resistant to certain types of damage, just like I said. So, demon roll in melee, it gives you a fail system. Like if you roll the demon, if you roll the natural 20, it says If you roll a demon when attacking in melee combat, you miss your target and cannot push the roll. You might also suffer an additional mishap. Of course, you suffer an additional mishap. Roll on the table below. If the result is unreasonable, the GM decides the effect. Come on, it's definitely reasonable. My players love this stuff. They're chaotic as heck. So you roll a d6. You drop your weapon at your feet, picking it up as an action. You expose yourself to the enemy, who gets a free attack that cannot be dodged or parried. Your weapon cuts so deep into an object that it gets stuck. Pulling it free requires a strength roll. You accidentally toss your weapon d3 plus 3 meters. To pick it up, you must move and then perform an action. You slam your weapon into something so hard and damage it. Any use of this weapon gets a bane until it's repaired by an artisan. You hit yourself by mistake, roll for damage as usual, but without any damage bonus. So, for example, number 3, your weapon cuts so deep into an object that it gets stuck. Pulling it free requires a strength roll. I had a player who was in the middle of combat, and there were multiple things within, it was goblins, but there was multiple goblins within combat. So the player, he rolled and he failed critically. He rolled a demon, and I asked him, I was like, do you want to roll a d6 or shall I? I like to give my players that option. If they want to roll their own demise, who am I to stop them? So he rolled, he got a 3, and so I had him go ahead and roll the damage. Now, this is where the GM takes their own interpretation. I took it upon myself to give the character a little bit of fun, because he was able to kill the goblin, but because he struck with such force, the sword penetrated the goblin and then penetrated the rock that was right behind the goblin. So the next turn that came around, when they rolled initiative, he rolled in the top. He had to use his entire action to pull his sword free, and he did, but it's a waste of a turn. But it's because he critically failed on the turn before. So, where it was a critical fail, we turned it into a success for the character. And I narratively did that so that way he didn't feel robbed. Even though he rolled terrible, I still like to reward my players with a little bit of fun every now and then. Hitting inanimate objects. If you hit a non-living object like a door or a lock, you hit automatically. Only roll for damage. Inanimate objects often have an armor rating, however. And it's true, there's doors that have, armor ratings, so it just takes a while for a player to, beat through a door if it has an armor rating. It makes a lot of noise, though. Hearing. So when hit by an attack in close combat, you can choose to parry the attack with a drawn weapon or shield. Note that you cannot draw the weapon to parry, as free actions can only be performed on your own turn. You must declare that you are going to parry before the attacker rolls any damage. So if me, or as I, the GM, roll an attack that can be parried against a player character, I say, okay, it hits. And if they say, they have to say at that moment that they want to parry it. If I roll damage, damage is done. They have to say it before I roll damage. They just have to. That's what it says. That's what it says. It says you cannot parry unarmed. It is also impossible to both parry and dodge the same attack. You can parry while prone, which is kind of funny to me, but Hey, it says you can. When pairing, you roll against the skill level for the weapon. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. What that last sentence means, though, let me explain that a little bit more. When pairing, you roll against the weapon or the skill level of the weapon. So if you're using your longsword to parry whatever attack is coming at you, you need to roll swords. If you're using a staff, you roll staffs. If you're using a dagger, roll knives. If you're using a mace, use hammers, so on and so forth. It makes sense. You know, if you're using this weapon to do this thing, you need to roll your weapon skill for this weapon. Makes sense to me. Reaction. Parrying is a reaction as it breaks the initiative order. It replaces your regular action, and you must immediately flip your initiative card. This means that you cannot parry if you have already performed your action in the round. But see the heroic ability, defensive, and we covered that. If your parry, so durability. If your parry succeeds, the enemy's attack hits your weapon or shield. If you suffer no damage. However, if the damage exceeds your weapon's durability, the weapon is damaged and cannot be used until it is repaired with a crafting roll. Yeah, you can break weapons. Shield. If you have a shield drawn, you can parry with it instead of your weapon. There is no skill for shields. Instead, you use any strength-based melee skill, i.e., for example, any of them except knives and stabs, to parry with a shield. Piercing damage. Piercing attacks can never damage a parrying weapon or shield. Monsters. As they roll, monster attacks, page 83, cannot be parried unless otherwise specificated. There we go. Specified. Wow. Oh my gosh. I don't know what's going on there. And that's how I like when I'm explaining monster attacks. And when we get to the bestiary and really go into detail, like the monsters of the book, or of Dragonbane at this moment, it actually says it in there. Like there are multiple monsters that can be parried, but only certain attacks from those monsters can be parried. And so basically, I will roll on the table for that monster, and I'll see the name of it, and I'll read the description. And typically at the end of the description, it says it can be parried or dodged. And that's typically what I do, because I like to describe the attack and the name of it to give the players a little bit extra. I am all about trying to terrify my players just a little bit. And if I can give them just a little bit extra information so they can understand what's really happening in combat, sold. I will do it all day. Parry movement. When successfully parrying an attack, you can move both yourself and the enemy 2 meters, 1 square, in any direction. These movements follow the usual rules, but do not count towards anyone's movement in the round and trigger no free attacks from anyone. I like that. I've had a couple people parry in my game. Mostly it's those that have played in my one-shots and consistently. Now that they're starting to understand the rules as much as I am, I'm gonna have to use that one. I like that one. Rolling a dragon when pairing. If you roll a dragon when pairing, you immediately perform a counter attack on your opponent, an automatic hit when your weapon that cannot be dodged or parried. This does not apply if the attacker rolled a dragon as well. In that case, you need a dragon just to parry, and you do not get a counterattack. So there's so many ways that this game is giving you the ability to just outright kill whatever you're fighting. And I tell people all the time, spoiler alert, monsters auto hit. Monsters auto hit. They don't roll to see if they hit. The only thing that I roll for a monster is to see what attack they're doing against the player character. They auto hit, and I love that. And some of these monsters can do some damage. They can really take a bite out of somebody. But on the same aspect, the player characters, they can do some really heavy hitting damage. And if you roll just right, if you roll the right stuff, you could potentially get multiple free attacks, a counterattack, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. There's Darkwing Duck. That's who we got right here. Dodging. So as an alternative to pairing, you can try to dodge when hit by an attack. You cannot parry and dodge at the same attack. Again, that was stated on the last page. You must choose one or the other. You can dodge while prone. You must declare that you are dodging before your opponent rolls the damage. So again, no matter if you're dodging or parrying, you must tell the GM prior to him or her or it, them, they, whatever, before they roll the damage, regardless. So if they roll and they hit, you need to let them know right then and there. That's it. Now, rolling for the dodge, you must roll your evade. On success, you evade the attack and take no damage. On a failure, you are hit by the attack. Reaction. Dodging is a reaction, and like parrying, requires that you have not already performed your action in the round. Once you have dodged, your action in the round is spent, and you must flip your initiative card. Movement. On a successful dodge, you may, if you want, move up to 2 meters in any direction. This movement does not trigger free attacks from anyone. So basically, if you are right next to each other, okay, side by side in one square, if you dodge, it's saying that you can move a square, which is really cool. It's a really cool aspect of the game. Monsters. As a rule, monster attacks can be dodged unless otherwise specified. There you go. So monster attacks can be dodged, but again, that takes up your action. Special attacks? What is this? Oh my gosh. Special attacks. So in addition to simply trying to hit the enemy, there are a few special attacks that you can use in melee. You must always declare that you are using a special attack before rolling the attack. Several special attacks are resolved by opposed rolls. When rolling for an NPC without the skill in question, the GM rolls against the default skill level of 5. So, there are extra things that are attached to some weapons in the gear section, and we'll get to those when we see them. Find a weak spot. If your weapon is piercing, you can try to find a gap within the enemy's armor or natural armor. You get a bane on the attack, but if it hits, the enemy counts as armorless. Now, there's some that have like an armor rating of 8. So the more and more you hit it, of course you're gonna, it's gonna take a lot of damage because a knife does a D8 of damage. So if a monster has armor rating of 8, even if you did the max, it still wouldn't be enough to actually do damage to it. So being able to find the weak spot makes it armorless, and you could potentially really hurt it. Topple. You try to topple an enemy to the ground instead of inflicting damage. This is handled with an opposed roll between your skill level and the weapon you are using, and the enemy's evade. If your weapon has the toppling feature, you get a boon. The attack counts as an action for you, but not for your opponent. It cannot be dodged or parried. An effective way of using the special attack is to work together with another person, another player character. If you topple the opponent, your friend can attack the prone enemy before they get up. Disarm. You can try to disarm your enemy instead of inflicting damage. This is handled with a opposed roll between your and the enemy skills level in the weapons you are using. The attack counts as an action for you, but not for your opponent. It cannot be dodged or parried. If the enemy is holding the weapon with both hands, you get a bane. If you succeed, the weapon lands d6 meters away from the direction of your choice. Picking up the weapon from the ground counts as an action. Disarm does not work on shields or natural weapons, like claws or mandibles. Grapple. You try to grapple a humanoid enemy instead of inflicting damage. This is handled with an opposed roll between your brawling and the enemy's brawling. The attack counts as an action for you, but not as your opponent. It cannot be dodged or parried. If your attempt fails, you fall to the ground. If it succeeds, both of you fall to the ground, and the enemy is trapped in your grip. As long as you maintain the grip, the enemy can neither move nor perform an action that requires body movement except trying to break free. Doing so is an opposed roll from your brawling and the enemy's brawling. The roll is a free action for the enemy, but not for you. While maintaining your grip, you are also unable to move or perform an action that requires body movement except break. This counts as an unarmed attack with a boon that cannot be dodged or parried. Releasing the enemy is a free action. Staying hydrated. Oh, melee attacks. So, to be successful in melee combat, it is important to realize that your most precious resource is your actions. You only get one per round, including reactions such as dodging or parrying. If several player characters are fighting together, it is often very effective to focus on the same enemy, which is always very effective to fight the same thing and you just bounce from one monster to the other. Why split the party up when you can fight one thing at a time? But if you get the option to split the party, always split the party. But always remember that you are too exposed, or you two are exposed as attacks after performing your action. The heroic abilities defensive and lightning fast significantly increase your ability to defend yourself against multiple opponents. In single combat against an opponent as powerful as yourself, it may be wise to wait and let the enemy strike first. If their attack misses, you do not need to parry or dodge. You can then perform your own attack against the enemy is unable to protect themselves. The drawback is that you surrender your initiative to the enemy, who may choose a completely different action than you expect, which is completely honest. They might do something that you don't expect. You should always expect the unexpected. Always. We'll cover ranged combat and then we'll call it for this moment. Ranged combat. To use a ranged weapon, it must first be drawn, free action, just like in melee. You should preferably be positioned over 2 meters from your target, i.e., for example, not in the adjacent map. So not on top of each other, spaced, at least 1 square. Standing 2 meters away or less gives you a Bane on the attack. Roll against the skill for the weapon you are using. For throwing weapons, you can use the same skill as your melee attack, such as knives or spears. If your attack hits, the weapon determines which dice you roll to see how much it inflicts. The damage can be increased by damage bonus and a dragon roll and decreased armor. And again, Free League, you never disappoint. Never disappoint. Demon rolls in ranged combat. It's just fantastic. It really is. It really is. If you roll a demon when performing a ranged attack, you miss your target and cannot push the roll. And that's another thing. I know we've talked about it once or twice, but I just want to keep bringing that up. You can always push your roll unless you roll a demon. You cannot push demons. You just can't. So roll on the table below. 1, you drop your weapon at your feet, picking it up as an action. 2, you run out of arrows and must get more before you can use your weapon again. Re-roll for sling or throwing weapons. 3, you hit a valuable or important item nearby. The GM decides what it is. It could just be one of your players or your fellow adventurers. 4, you break your weapon. Any use of this weapon gets a Bane until it is repaired by an artisan. 5, you accidentally hit a random player character or friendly NPC. Roll your damage as usual, including damage bonus. 6, you hit yourself by mistake. Roll for damage as usual, but without damage bonus. So you knock back the arrow, you shoot yourself in the knee. It's always good. Damage bonus. You get a damage bonus for ranged weapons just as in melee. But note that crossbows do not give you a damage bonus. Range. Your weapon tables on pages 74 through 75 specify the range of various weapons, that is, maximum distance in meters, in which the weapon can be used effectively. You can fire at targets up to twice the listed range, but you get a Bane. Critical hit. When rolling a dragon, when performing a ranged attack, results in a critical hit, which means that it can only be dodged if the opponent rolls a dragon. You may also choose one of the following effects. Essentially, your weapon does double damage. Just like, oh my gosh, sorry, my eye is. Your weapon's damage is doubled. Excluding the damage bonus and other bonuses, roll twice as many dice as normal and then add them up. For example, a critical hit with a longbow is 2d12. God, 2d12? That's some damage. And then if you're adding in a damage bonus, that could be a d4 or a d6. If the enemy is prone, that's another d6. Wow, that's some damage. Armor and natural armor have no effect against the attack, as it hits a gap or a weak spot. This effect can only be chosen if the attack deals piercing damage, which most of the time, if you're doing ranged combat, you're going to be doing piercing damage unless it's a sling. A sling does bludgeoning. So, parry and dodge. Parrying a ranged attack requires a shield. It works the same way in melee combat, except that rolling a dragon does not give you a counterattack because you're at long range. You can dodge ranged attacks just like melee attacks. Obscure targets. In your view of the target, it is partially obscured by an object or person. No matter if it is friend or foe, you get a bane on the attack. On a grid map, you can shoot past a person standing between you and the target, but with a bane. So remember, you could hit your friend. If the target is completely out of sight, perhaps hiding behind a wall, you cannot shoot it at all. If you are playing without a map, the GM decides whether your line of sight is partial or completely blocked. All right. That is the end of this episode. I tell you what. Two things. One, tell me which of the critical hits excites you the most. And let's go back. Which of the 3 critical hits do you like the most? Do you like double your damage dice? Do you like perform a second attack? Or armor has no effect? Which one do you like? Tell me in the comments. I need to know. And then also, I want to know which of the demon rolls in melee or demon rolls in ranged combat, the critical fails, which one do you like the most? Me personally, I like this one. Your weapon cuts so deep into the object that it gets stuck. Pulling it free requires a strength roll, counts as an action. That's my favorite one. But that's what I want you to do. I want you to like this video, comment. First, what is your favorite critical hit? And then second, what is your favorite critical failure? But make sure to share this video with your friends, family, and other nerds. Let's get some people going, let's get some people playing some Dragonbane. So until next time, friends, family, and nerds, live long and game on.